So hello, everyone. My name is Mira Blaustein. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival. And gosh, some of you have probably been with us. We have started our talks online ever since basically mid-March when we had to close our office, and we had some really wonderful talks, and we have some more really wonderful talks planned ahead. So check us up online at woodstockfilmfestival.org. I also be very remiss if I didn't say that we are going through a difficult time due to COVID-19. So we have an emergency fund in place, and if you have enjoyed our talks, if you enjoyed the Woodstock Film Festival and would like to see it go on, we would be very thankful if you made whatever contribution you're comfortable with. It's all tax deductible. Oh,
Sorry.
That's okay. We have some incredible panelists with us this evening. Very lucky to have them. And I also want to thank NYWIFT and Women History Month Kingston for being our partners this evening. This panel was actually supposed to have taken place in March, but obviously, for obvious reasons, we couldn't do it. So we're very lucky that we can bring you all of the panelists and more today. So I'm going to introduce them very quickly, and then we will get the conversation going. We have Carol Dysinger, who is a documentary filmmaker. She very recently won one of the most coveted awards there are, an Academy Award. So very happy to have her. Carol is also a film professor, and she's been working very hard on teaching online. Yes. We have Elissa Federoff, who is a young, very successful executive, recently was promoted to president of distribution at Neon, which is one of the hottest and best distribution company today, among other many of her achievements. She's very responsible for the success of Parasite, which won multiple Academy Awards this past February. Jamie Zelermyer, who is the president of NYWIFT, is a producer of film and live events. Debra Granik is a very accomplished filmmaker of narratives and documentaries, nominated for an Academy Award, winner of Independent Spirit Award, and Ellen Chenoweth is one of the top casting directors. Many, many credits to her name, including all the films by the Coen brothers. So it's welcome, ladies, and thank you for being with us. And I'm going to ask each one of you the same question just to get us started. Before you attendees are more than welcome, by the way, to please write in your questions in the Q&A section, and I will do my best to get to as many questions as possible. But for now, I would like each of the speakers to talk a little bit about the beginning of your career. If you can select a pivotal moment that helped you make a turn in the path, in your professional path towards success, what if that's a person, a moment, an event, a film, an experience. If you're able to select one and tell us about it, that would be great. I would like to start with Carol. Carol?
Well, hi, can you hear me? That's the
yes.
Sign on of the day. Well, I've had so many careers, all in the film business, it's hard to say which one, and each had a turning. My first was going to film school. NYU undergrad, and winning very young a Student Academy Award, which was for narrative film. And subsequently, probably the thing that started my professional life is when I was tapped by Don Letts to edit videos for The Clash, which one of those jobs that now that I have an Academy Award that I edited for The Clash will no longer lead my obituary. So it was through editing, really. I was good at it, and I cut narratives, I cut videos, they were all cut on film, but called videos at the time. And it was editing that allowed me to sort of prove my professional worth, that I developed an ability to recognize voice in a filmmaker and in myself. And then I also launched on a career of screenwriting, which ultimately ended up with me coming back to New York and starting to teach. And I think is when I started to teach was when I really could turn to my own work. And that is when I started making movies in Afghanistan, which led to making a Learning to Skateboard in Afghanistan, If You're a Girl. But I think it was deciding to be an editor at a time when I was fighting to be a writer, fighting to be a director, just not getting anywhere, making the decision to say, okay, I want to make movies, and the jobs I can get to make movies are editing movies, which is kind of like knitting the movie. It's like literally making the movie. And that's what gave me my foundation, both professionally and creatively, to be able ultimately to turn to my own work. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
You're sticking to it, good. I'm gonna move to another filmmaker here, Debra Granik. If you can dial back a little bit in your career, is there something, is there a moment that you'd like to share with us or experience?
Yeah, well, I actually am connected to Carol because I went to NYU and Carol was one of my teachers. So me going to NYU was also, you know, it's when you decide that you're going to try really hard to be a filmmaker. When you decide to institutionalize yourself and go to a program, a formal program. I've been working in the more like instructional and educational video scene up in Boston, and came down to New York specifically to try this formal program. And then, so working out through shorts and having that be the way that you get to learn all aspects of filmmaking. And then from there, I would say Sundance ended up being very, very pivotal because of the encouragement factor. So you work hard in school, you experiment, you come out with a short that then, you know, someone sees the short and they say, well, what would you be interested in coming to the feature program? You know, would you, do you have more of that story? Do you have something else that you could develop? And so Michelle Satter was someone who, at that time, that was her very extremely important method of really harvesting women filmmakers in the United States, was to create this program. And then, like the film schools had done like in the decade before, which is include a whole lot of women in their classes, right? Carol, you saw that really dramatic shift, because the class I was in was 50% women. So that's Carol right. Witnessed every year it getting a little bit better statistically. And then Michelle just did this quiet thing. She didn't call any attention to it. She just populated this laboratory with women each year. And then, so at the end of, it's been going on 25, 30 years. You have a lot of women that were encouraged, a lot of women that were told, come to this lab specifically so that you can begin to test out some of your material, learn a lot of things from mentors and peers. So that really was the nurturance that I was lucky enough to encounter. The school plus this really, you know, this crucible of independent filmmaking. It's not the totality, but it was doing something specific.
Interesting. I mean, school certainly has played a big part then in the genesis of your career. So that's really great for anybody out here who is a student. That's actually really wonderful to hear. Jamie Zelermyer, can I put you on a spot?
Sure. Yeah. I think for me, it was working on Boys Don't Cry, which was in the late 90s. I was the production manager on that film. And that film was the beginning of my relationship with John Hart and Jeff Sharp and other people who worked on that film. And I think everybody that worked on that film just felt a very special connection to what we were making. And no one knew what it would do, but it was just one of those projects that just felt special, and that led to working on You Can Count on Me, which was another Heart Sharp film, and several other Heart Sharp films, which really led me to working at Focus Features, and being an executive at Focus for I don't know, 6-7 years. But I kind of go back to Boys Don't Cry as sort of the seed of all of that. And I think working at Focus Features is what also kind of led me to NYWIFT. And so I think it all gets changed, you know, comes together, gets stringed together. That was a very special experience.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Ellen, you've been casting director for a bit. Can you tell a little bit about what stands out, do you think, for you in terms of the beginning of your career?
I was working in New York, and I didn't really have much sense of what I was going to do. I just knew I wanted to have an interesting life, and I kind of fell into a job at the Actors Studio. And it was an amazing time at the studio when Lee Strasberg was there, Aaliyah Kazan, Arthur Penn, and I watched those guys week after week talk to actors, and I just got really interested in actors and how they worked, and not doing it myself, but just their process. And I remember really clearly, I think when I first really became aware of casting directors, I saw Manhattan, and Juliet Taylor, who's become a good friend, was for many years Woody Allen's casting director. And I remember a scene where Diane Keaton was talking to Woody Allen about her boyfriend, and he was so brilliant, he was a genius, and he was this sex god, and then they run into him at a party, I think at the Museum of Modern Art or something, and it's Wally Shawn, and I'm sure Wally Shawn is all those things, but it was just such a, you know, moment of like, whoa, this is really funny and good, and I was getting to know a lot of actors, and I just had a sense of, I don't know, maybe I could do that, and ended up going to LA with someone who I'd met from the studio, Pete Masterson, and through various jobs met Barry Levinson very early on, and we just hit it off and realized we kind of connected and thought the same things were funny and liked the same actors, and he hired me to do Diner, and I was really lucky, because we were all kind of starting out. And anyway, that was, I really never looked back after that.
Wow.
So really, certain people, certain directors have helped you form or shape your career, I would say.
Right. Well, definitely Barry, who I still work with after all these years. We just did something together, which was supposed to come out, and I hope it will soon. But yeah, definitely Barry, and I feel like I owe my career to Barry in a lot of ways. I mean, he took a chance on me when I was really like a kid from New York with no experience. I didn't know how to make a deal, and it was kind of learning on the job. So yeah, he was definitely an important, and is an important
right
person.
Well, thank you, Barry.
To me.
Elissa Federoff, the very successful young female executive. I would love to hear how your career was shaped, the beginning part of it. If you can share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I also was living in New York and pretty aimless myself. I knew that if I was going to work, it would be for a long time. So it should probably be something interesting and something I wanted to do. And I didn't have any film experience, but I knew that I always wanted to work in film. So I just took any internship, any contact of anybody that I could meet along the way that could potentially bolster a resume that would get me, you know, a notable internship, because it was really all about, you know, it is currently all about internships, and it was then. I really didn't know that when I was in college. And I got an internship at Think Film. And I, you know, I sent it through the web, and I never thought I would get a call back. And I ended up at this internship at Think Film, and that really was such an incubator of so many executives in the film industry at this point. And it was really all about everybody that I met there that propelled me to my next job, to my next job, to my next job. You know, it made it really easy to kind of open the door for the next thing. And I was at a film premiere for the movie Short Bus. And I ran into actually a college friend of mine who was there. He was working at the Weinstein Company at the time. He was an assistant to a high-level executive. And he ended up giving me a job as a temporary, yeah, like a temp during Oscar season. And that job ended up, like, I ended up working after that at Lionsgate. I ended up working at Oscilloscope, which is another person who came from Think Film. And then I went back to the Weinstein Company. And from there, that's when I met Tom Quinn. And that really, I think, was like the big, you know, a change in direction for my career. It was sort of like I went from having jobs and these being my jobs to really like having a career and really bolstering myself in it and making a name for myself and doing really, really interesting independent film projects, and having somebody who wanted to mentor me and sort of take me to whatever company he sort of created next. So that's where so currently I'm at Neon, and he's the CEO. And so that was a relationship that was really important that you know, sort of fostered my career.
Well, Tom Quinn is really a very special executive and person, and you he's lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have him. I know him well. He's wonderful. Before I open it up to questions from our attendees, and we're beginning to get quite a few, earlier we all chatted a little bit about how do we think, or how do you think, or how do you envision films, content, the kind of creativity that's going to be happening post COVID-19? If you feel that what we're going through now will affect the kind of films, series, anything that we will be seeing on the various screens. And I wonder, Elissa, if I can start with you, because you're coming from the point of view of executive and distributor, if you have a sense that what we're going through now is going to change the way films are going, I mean, the content, the subjects of the films going forward.
I would imagine yes, for sure. Although I would leave sort of the subject matter and the content potentially to the filmmakers in this room, because I'm certainly very curious to hear how this has maybe changed your creative process, and also what you guys are creating right now, and sort of the collaborations that are happening sort of in this space. Because we all have time. Some of us have time, some of us have no time, I'm not sure, but it certainly gets your brains going. From the perspective of how we're releasing content, that will certainly change, and it has already. And I think that, you know, the big conversation right now is the windows, and the windows collapsing, and are we going to see less time in theaters? Are we going to see less theaters in general? I do think that, you know, theaters will come back, and I think people will absolutely go to theaters, and I think cinema is so special, and it will never die, and it's always been something that's very, very important for our society. But I do think that landscape will look different, and the studios right now have already made very bold proclamations about how they'll release content, and how you know, they'll put it on VOD at the same time that they'll put it in theaters, or they'll put it on VOD for they'll put it in theaters for 30 days before they put it onto VOD. They're really looking to capitalize on that product and that content in a much shorter amount of time, and, you know, potentially over you know, the next years after COVID is, you know, will that potentially perpetuate more and more content to be made, more streams of content, more, you know, there are a lot of content creators out there, a lot of filmmakers, and will this potentially be an avenue for more of their work to get out because it'll be coming out faster? So that's, you know, just something I think about in my space, but I would really love to know from the rest of you guys what you think is happening right now and what you think we'll see on the other side.
Debra or Carol, would you like to address that? Either one of you?
Well,
You go first.
yeah. I mean, it's always hard to think while you're in something, you know. I mean, I think one of the things that film does well is distill. And, you know,
Yeah.
so there's such a, and I've always admired like documentary filmmakers, maybe Carol, you feel the same way, who go out and do something right when it's happening, you know, and you've done that. But with this one, it almost feels like the story's been written so many times. You know, it's like living in it's like living in the dystopian novels that you're scared for your kids to read. And you know, we're in it. We're living it. And so, you know, one of the things that was baffling to me and like very confounding actually was that the one project I'm working on is getting the themes in it are extremely front and center right now during COVID about the idea of who is essential, and but they don't get paid like they're essential. They don't get treated like they're essential, right? So the idea,
Yeah.
but this issue existed. It's been a really big problem of neoliberalism for the last 4 decades, really peaking out during the Trump era. So it's not new to COVID. It's that COVID shows it in a way that we haven't seen. So I think there probably are a lot of people writing about interpersonal negotiations, you know, that are happening that are very class, you know, really overtly class based. And I think that material is getting written, probably some very dark stuff, probably some very interesting stuff. You know, it's almost like if Ken Loach's film, Sorry to Bother You, Sorry We Missed You, had come out even 3 weeks later. The whole idea of people delivering things in a white van and all, you know, I mean, that film, all its conditions existed right before COVID, and now they're magnified in a way that whoever drives a white van to deliver the Amazon stuff we knew it was a problem. We just didn't talk about it really in that same way. So I think it will infuse a lot of people's material, and then there's going to be the whole different schools that will attempt so hard to look at what was it that led to COVID. You know, that there was all these preconditions that were there, and some of the stories were being written right before COVID. So I think some people will say, and I think this is where I'm landing, it's like all these things that are making the situation very, you know, very vivid to us now were pre-existing. We better know what those are. You know, COVID did not come out of a vacuum. So, but you know, like the Parasite filmmaker, you know, he's so willing to look at like some very, very dark stuff. You know, it's, I think some of us who are just really just actually very afraid right now, I don't know, it's like the fact that I'm writing about people in a big box store that work in it who don't have COVID concerns is like such a relief. I'm like, let me just go be in that world, that pre-COVID world, even though their jobs are really difficult and they're trying to scrape by. The fact that they don't have masks on and they're not nervous whether they're going to actually have people that they love get sick or themselves. I'm like, any COVID vacation is where I'm at, but I think there are filmmakers that are very strong who can stare it in the face and make dramas right out of it. I think Saturday Night Live has put out a ton of content that shows, you know, that there's a whole Zoom cinema is a whole thing. Carol, you're referencing that, you know. I mean, they're going to town with that. Comedians will probably take it away. That's the best thing. Dark humor, but they're the ones who are going to have something that we can actually watch without feeling sick and upset.
Well,
Yeah. And
I did,
Yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
I was going to say that we did at NIWIF, we did a panel with Lucy Mukherjee, who is one of the head programmers at Tribeca. And so we were talking about the future of content and what will people want to see, and the word comedy did come up a lot. That it will, that is a genre that there'll be a lot of room for, hopefully, that people will want to see still. And, you know, how much will be too much or oversaturation for COVID themed things, or will people find it too depressing, or, and I don't know, but I think that we talked a lot about the idea of comedy and how that would kind of play out as festivals look, you know, in the coming years for material and what they're gonna show or what people might want. The other thing I think is podcast. Like before this, I was working on a podcast. And so that's just kind of accelerated. You don't need to see people in person to do a podcast. You can do a lot of phone interviews and people can edit. So the podcasting, I think, is just an interesting type of content that people can still do very actively, just as another form of content.
This is going
I've
to be
certainly
on the
seen
podcast.
that.
Go ahead, Carol. Oh, Ellen, sorry. I go ahead, Ellen, please.
No, I was just going to say I've definitely seen a number of things that actors have gotten together on their own, Zoom productions. There's a group, I didn't know of this group, called Theater of War, and they did Oedipus last week, and it was Fran McDormand and Oscar Isaac and David Strathairn, and it was so relevant because it's set during a plague, and they were all just so good. And the same night, unfortunately, there was a David Mamet reading with Patty LuPone and John Malkovich. And I mean, actors want to act and they want to find relevant things. So I'm seeing a lot of that kind of thing. New plays, old plays, people just wanting to work however they can right now.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is there's so many, it's like things that were considered like inevitable cause and effect, you know, audience, you know, all this stuff is, the bottlenecks are moving, you know. I mean, I look at my students and they're freaking out because, you know, the world is changing. But, you know, as I keep trying to remind them, is like, listen, you don't want it to go back to normal. Normal is how we got here. So like, enough with normal. It's like, it's time. Doris Lessing in her autobiography had a great quote at the very beginning. I won't go into the long thing, but she left her kids and her husband to go join an anti-apartheid group in Cape Town in the 1920s. And she left her whole life behind and was sitting in an SRO hotel with the radios on, the baby's crying. She was like 20. And she said, I'd come to the first time in my life. I came several times after, but this was the first time where it was necessary for me to reimagine what I needed to survive. And I think what's important now is that people have to bring their imagination to this situation and their ability to parse the elements of it, because there's, what does an audience want to see? I mean, I loved my movie Learning to Skateboard in a War Zone, If You're a Girl, but I did not think it was going to get the response that it did. It was very personal. It was very much about the girls I loved in Afghanistan. I really wanted people to see how great they were. It was a nightmare to make. I can't even begin to tell you. But I realized in watching it, just I mean, A&E has never even broadcast the bloody thing, but it's just going nuts. And I'm like, people, and it made me really understand, as a documentary filmmaker, people don't need to know how bad things are, because we have social media for that. We used to need to know how bad things were when it was ABC, CB, you know, there were 3 channels that went off at midnight. Now we need to know how to survive them. Now we need to know, you know, how we as human beings can move within the systems that trap us and achieve a certain amount of resilience and fulfillment, which I think is why comedy is sort of good. Is I think it's definitely why Parasite was such a hit, because it was like looking at crushing poverty. I mean, that flood scene was genius, but with imagination and with humor, you know. And who laughs more than at, you know, when in a disaster? Having been in war zones, I can tell you, I brought a copy of 40-Year-Old Virgin to show. I mean, it's not like, you know, Sullivan's Travels entirely. You don't need Hey Hey in the Hayloft, but there is this one capacity to have a larger audience, albeit on a screen, you know, which the Stephen Sondheim birthday stuff was amazing. 2, putting the tools back in the hands of the makers, right? Which has been happening for a while, but there hasn't been a way to distribute it or call it. If it doesn't win a festival, it's not going to get picked up, right? Most likely. And 3, so the system had all these like bottlenecks in it, and they're breaking. And I'm sure in business they're trying to figure it out, but like, it's like actors taking it over. It's like John Cassavetes, when somebody invented a 16mm camera, he went and he just reinvented it, and nobody made any money. So that's the next piece, is how people make this stuff and earn a living. And that's the scary piece for me, because I think unions are going to suffer, crews are going to get smaller, a lot smaller. They're talking on a lot of the TV shows of having a small cast, small crew, and quarantining everybody.
Yes.
Right? And my fear is there's going to be a bifurcation in the industry where there'll be the big technical CGI, everybody's like, every shot takes 9 shots and 10,000 terabytes of computing, or the smaller genre, you know, based films by imaginative producers and imaginative writers that have these stories of resilience in them. The question is, who's going to fund them? And how are those people going to make a living? Because I don't want to see filmmaking become the next, the parvenu of just rich people, or just, it's like, I can do what I do because I managed to get a teaching job. I don't earn a living directing documentaries. I don't know many people who do, right? There are very few. So it's like, it's not a great way to make a living, but it's a wonderful life. And so I know I'm sort of going on a lot, but there are these pieces of it, and the pieces are detaching. And I'm just hoping the person with the imagination to put what an audience needs to see, which is a reason to live and how to do it as the world is changing unimaginably around us. What fits the metrics of a studio, Netflix's algorithms, or is it Netflix, one of them, and this sort of prediction of what an audience wants, but what is the art of it, and how can we get that out to more people in a way they would want to see it, so it's not just at festivals and on whatever. Sorry. So I think it's a fascinating time, and I think anybody starting out now, if they use their imagination and aren't afraid to ask, great actors to do something that'll take them a day and that is good, there's a lot that can happen that can launch a young person, that who it doesn't have college tuitions and mortgages to pay. But I'm worried about my friends who have college tuitions and mortgages to pay, because I don't know if that $20 million movie that supported so much of our field will ever come back again.
I think that's, I sort of feel like that has been happening already, and now it's just gonna like drive it home.
Right.
And I think with, a lack of as many movie theaters as, we currently have sort of had, and so many streamers and everybody moving into that space and everybody needing content. It sort of felt like it's sort of been going that way anyway. It's sort of like these big tentpoles go here, and then everything else goes here to, whatever it is Netflix, it's Hulu, it's Apple TV now, or, you know, it's Peacock, it's HBO Max. Like there are all of these like spaces now for this other kind of content. And I mean, that's like a whole different conversation, but I do think that there are absolutely outlets for that stuff. And I think that there's a lot of people who want to watch it, and it's going to be a lot more accessible to them. The monetization of it.
Don't pay enough to pay the movie, to make the movie, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And then the making money of it is going to, oh God, and I really hope this is not true. I really hope that it doesn't start to look like the music industry.
Yeah,
it's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to get to some of the questions, because we have now quite a few questions from the attendees, and I want to be able to get to some of them. So this is a question from Nina Kentsis, and it's, you have touched upon it, but perhaps you can, one of you, perhaps not Carol, can expand upon it. She's asking, do you think that all films in the future will have to include the new life under COVID-19, people in masks, physical distancing? Should screenwriters, perhaps Nina is a screenwriter, should screenwriters be writing COVID-19 into their screenplays set in the present day? Now, this is, I don't know if anybody who wants to take that, but perhaps Elissa, you're a good person to answer that, because you're the person who's going to bring the films out to the audiences. So
I don't know. I mean, I think that's, I mean, at some point, I guess movies started putting cell phones in every, you know, in every scene. They started putting texting and texts in every scene, and then they'll also say, you know, and then you saw movies where they didn't have cell phones, and you were like, oh, does this take place in the 70s? And you know, it sort of confused audiences. So I don't really know the answer to that, but I'm sure that we will see a lot of it, because it's sort of baked into the reality that we have now. And now I watch television shows where people are in a bar or a restaurant, and I'm like, they should be wearing masks. Like that's just what goes through my head.
Well, it's like AIDS. It's like AIDS. It's like, how long did it take condoms to make it into love scenes in movies? A long time. Yeah. But they did, you know, but they did.
Mm-hmm. I think also for me, I mean, I'm very hopeful for a vaccine. And I think the vaccine question is also a big part of this question. You know, if the vaccine comes in December, or if the vaccine comes in a year and a half, I mean, that's a big, in terms of time perspective right now, the timing will mean very different things. I mean, obviously the longer, then I think the more it will have to be addressed in content. If it's a shorter period of time, maybe not, as maybe people will become more forgiving. But I just keep hoping.
Right. I have a question here for both Jamie and Debra, and it's from Marlene Edelstein, and she's asking, what kind of material are you looking for these days? Do you look at books to option and then develop for features or TV? And that is just one option of how you're looking for projects, and what kind of projects are you looking for? So Jamie is a producer, Debra is a director. If and when you direct, Debra, projects that you have not written yourself. And if you have, where do you get the inspiration? Perhaps you can answer that as well.
So I definitely like doing adaptations, and two of the films were adaptations from novels, and so optioning is a big positive thing in my mind. I try not to option things that are like bestsellers, you know, because those are inaccessible. They're usually simple stories that can be done with lower budgets, and you know, kind of very down to earth stories. And I love, there are many nonfiction news articles that have interested me, you know, for adaptation. So I look at many sources. You know, that being said, they take a long time to develop. So it's not like, you know, once you find something you like, you have to kind of sit with it and be with it and develop it for quite a long time. So it's not mountains of material, I think. But yeah, it's, I work closely with a creative partner, my producing partner, Anne Roslini, and we always if something catches one of our attention, we share it immediately and just see if the other person resonates. So yeah, I don't close the door to anything. If someone found an interesting, mysterious letter, I'd be, that's a great launching place for a story. It comes from everywhere.
So, I mean, that's very interesting. It could also be an inspiration for some of the filmmakers who are here in terms of where a creative can take his or her inspiration from. A letter is a wonderful possibility. Jamie, how about you?
I mean, I don't think there's any magic answer. I would say a couple things that I am working on are sourced from my own life and my own childhood. I grew up very non-traditionally in West Virginia, and so some stuff that I'm working on currently is sourced from that. I'm working with Shoshannah Stern right now, who's a hearing impaired actress, and she has a feature script that she wants to get made, and I think telling the story of it's two women who are disabled who come together, and I think told through comedy, which I think kind of also speaks. It's just I love the story, the idea of telling a story of disability through comedy, and she's also just a brilliant actress and a great writer. But they're all very different. We're working with a friend, like my husband and I produced a short for a friend, and now he's writing a feature, and it just through common connections. So
Right.
there's you just have to connect with it, I think, like anyone. I mean, I don't have a particular genre, or I think it's more just about the material and the content.
Right. I have a question here from Debra Constable, and I think so. Elissa, when you talked about how you started as an intern, and in the place of internship, Think Film, you met a lot of people who then who one thing led to another, to another, to another. So Debra Constable is asking about connections. When somebody starts in our industry, how do you make those industry connections, and how? I mean, she feels that the way you were talking about the start of your career perhaps was, it seemed like it was easy for you, and perhaps for some people it's difficult. So how can we talk a little bit about, perhaps, because the film industry, we all know it, it's all about who you, I mean, so much of it is about who you know. So can you talk a little bit about how to work that? Any of you?
Sorry, go.
I was just saying, this is where I could put a plug in for new organizations like New York Women in Film and Television, and IFP, Independent Feature Project, and various organizations that have that are membership organizations where you can network with people. I also started as an intern many moons ago. And I do a lot of mentoring because I do think it is hard to get into the business, and I do try to give back when I can, and help people. I do try to help people get jobs when I can, because I think it is so unbelievably hard. So I do try to be generous in that way when I can. It's not always possible, but some of these organizations are really good to meet people and just connect with other people, and a lot of them have mentoring programs, which will also help you connect to somebody. So, look for those mentoring, look for those types of programs. So I think especially in New York City, it can be hard to meet people, and it can be hard to meet the right person, but there are other ways, I think, to find connection.
But if I can I jump in here, because this is something I deal with all the time. I think one of the key things is know what you're good at, even if it's not anything in the film business, and offer help. Because someone like me or Deborah, or a lot of filmmakers, when we start developing something, we don't have any money, nor do we even have a place to start advertising for interns. But there's somebody who I've mentored along the way. And basically she was an accountant, and she came in and just dealt with all of my receipts from 3 years of shooting. You know, it was something I literally physically could not do. And she came in and she just did it. And she said, I'd learn a lot organizing a book from somebody who made a film, if I can ask you questions as I go. And I just, you know, I was so grateful. I helped her along the way. And she's now a production accountant.
Wow.
But I think the thing is not to ask people to give you something. Ask people how you can help them, and then do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. Full stop. Never, you know, never fail at that. And then people will help you, because, you know, we can't do everything, and we need help.
We can't do everything? Are you sure?
No, we can't do everything.
Not superwomen, huh?
At Neon, we are obsessed with our interns. We love our interns so much. They are the most hardworking people that we have. We pay our interns. We have an amazing internship program. It's just, and a lot of them do get full-time jobs. It is an opportunity to make connections, but to get full-time jobs. And we go to every, you know, kind of film school website to get these names and call these names and interview these people. And when they work really hard for us, they're really rewarded. So, I mean, for all of the reasons that you said, Carol, it's just, if you show up, if you're doing it, like, you know, sometimes like they have no experience at all, but they're very dedicated, and that's important.
I have 2 questions here that are really about women in the film industry. And I can take either one of them. They're both, I think I'll start with Sue Lang. And she is asking, she says, I have been hearing that the money, meaning like whoever's greenlighting films, is looking for films about women. Are you, panelists, seeing anything to support that? Are people looking for female producers and directors? And if so, how do we, those of us who are not as connected, tap into that? Who wants to take that? Anybody? Jamie?
I mean, I can say that I know that the festival statistics have been changing. I believe they're more equitable. I think there's more women getting into film festivals. I still think it's very hard. I still think there's a pay gap. I still think there's a lot of work, but there's certainly a lot of attention around it. There's a lot of programs that are trying to lift up women, you know, it's like these mentoring programs or these directing programs, or very female specific programs. I still think it's very challenging. I mean, making a film for anyone is very hard. Getting financing for anyone is very hard. And, you know, so I think there is progress. I still think there's a lot of progress to go. I mean, obviously the Academy Awards, in terms of some of those statistics were very low. So I think there's a long, well, Carol,
documentary by and large.
You were standing for all of us, Carol.
God, so weird.
Anyone else wants to address that? Or there's another question that's similar about similar subjects. So if none of you want to address
I'm just going to say there's been enormous progress in my lifetime. I mean, the first Women in Film meeting I went to fit around a conference table. You know, I mean, it's enormous progress. I used to know every female director that worked ever in the world. And I had the phone numbers of every female DP who worked on the planet. And it's so different now. Nobody, you know, it's so different, but you have to be old to see progress, and that we need more.
For sure.
I'm curious, Ellen, if you've seen like any differences when you're casting things in your career, if the sort of like the roles have been written differently, if the kind of women that they've looked for in certain roles have looked different. I mean, potentially not,
age,
but
including age, I would say.
What?
I'm just including the age factor also.
And the weight.
And the weight.
Okay.
You
and the
know,
way-
I've certainly worked on things over the years where people, and I think this has changed, and maybe it's the people I work with, but I've worked on things where people were hyper aware of women's looks, and they would sit and watch an audition and rip a woman apart.
Hmm.
And I would cringe. And maybe it's working with people like the Coen brothers, who are, they're just very artist based, and not, they like a good face, and it's not all about, in fact, it's very little about the commercialism of it. It's more about an interesting quality. And I just worked on something with Joel Cohen, which unfortunately got shut down 3 weeks before he was finished, but it was a movie of Macbeth. And we were casting a small part of a nurse, and we saw some women who were very good, but not interesting enough for him. And he said something, and I've been working with him, I think 20 years, and I'd never quite gotten it so clearly, but he said, the quality they bring to it does half my job for me. So certainly for someone like Joel, it's about an interesting, for men and women. But yeah, I think things definitely have changed over the years in terms of content and what's acceptable. And I've never really been in a bad situation with auditions where I felt producers or directors, maybe I was naive about it, but I didn't really notice that so much, that they were taking advantage of women. I don't know, I kind of forgot the question.
Are you getting called? Do you feel like you're getting called for more jobs that are directed by women?
You know, it's interesting. All the years I've been doing it, I only worked with 2 women directors, Susan Seidelman and Nancy Myers, for years and years and years. And then in the last year, I've worked with 3 female directors.
Wow.
So, and 2 of them were first-time young women film directors. So that was exciting.
Can you name them? Who are the directors?
One is not so new. Susanna Bier did an HBO miniseries. And then I worked with, oh God, now I just blanked on her name. I'll think of it in a minute. Scott Rudin actually produced both of these, to his credit. The second one, it's a young Korean American woman playwright.
Uh-huh.
And that was supposed to be, originally it was going to shoot in May, and then one of the actors from Parasite is one of the stars of it, and so we had to delay to wait for him, and then everything got shut down, and we were supposed to shoot in New York and South Korea. Her name is Celine Song, young playwright. So I don't know what's going to happen with that one. The other one is oh God, this is so embarrassing. I'm blanking on her name.
That's okay.
It's I think it's probably almost finished now. It's a movie with Jennifer Lawrence, a very low budget drama with Jennifer Lawrence. So it has been interesting, and just in this past year to have, and I like it. I like it a lot. So I'm happy that there are more opportunities, seemingly.
I'm happy to hear that. I have another question here, and it's about the Time Up and Me Too movement, and it's being asked by Carol Dorn. So the Time Up and Me Too movements have done a good job of bringing awareness about and bringing young women into the fold. However, there's a whole swath of mature women who have been at this for a great deal of time, who still want to work, who have the skill, as well as a couple of decades of stamina. Do you think it is going to be more possible for more women of a mature age to get their chance in our industry? And how would you go about opening up more areas of opportunity for that age group?
Well, at NIWIFT, we collaborate on a writer's lab for women over 40. So that's just one specific example. I do think there's a lot of ageism. I think that's just the reality. And we talk a lot about that at the lab, and, you know, how these women who have this wealth of life and information and experience are just not being heard and not respected. But we take 12 writers. We just closed the submissions actually for this fall, and we pair them up with mentors and have a lab in the fall, and then stay in contact. And some of those writers are working writers.
Can I just go back a minute, because it just popped into my brain. It was such a senior moment. Lila Neugebauer. Lila, if you're watching, I'm so sorry. Anyway, young, really wonderful young theater director. She directed the Broadway show with Elaine May last year.
Oh, wow.
So it was Lila. Okay, sorry.
Ellen, I have a question for you. And it's being asked by Kathy Richter. And she's asking, what do you see post-COVID-19 regarding work for actors who primarily book day player roles in film and co-star and guest star roles on TV? And I would add to that even extras, which is not in the question, but I think it's...
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about that a lot. And I just was talking to my husband. I said, this is going to change things for extras, because if there are smaller crews and smaller casts, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think they're going to probably try to structure movies where a few people can work at the same time and then be released. But I think everyone's going to have to be really careful and tested, and maybe have an ensemble and everyone lives together. And I don't know if there's going to be, I hate to say it, it might be more digitalized extras in the future.
Yeah.
I don't anticipate giant casts for a while, and until there's a vaccine, and hopefully that'll be soon.
Do you have any insight into what's happening with SAG, by the way, these days?
I don't. I mean, I know that there's a DGA committee. You guys probably know more about this. Maybe Deborah, you've heard about it, but I think Steven Soderbergh's the head of this DGA committee to try to figure out how things are going to shoot. I mean, we can certainly cast, and writers can write, and producers can pitch things, and I think writers' rooms are working now, and we can have actors put themselves on tape for auditions. It's not ideal, but I think the big question is how do we shoot, and how do we do that safely? And I don't know how they're going to. I can't really imagine a movie with a lot of extras for a while.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I know that that shows are looking at, like shows that have some money are looking at all their re-looking at all their sets and re-looking at what can they build on a stage. I know for a fact some are doing that. I don't know about all, but shows that were midstream are definitely re-examining what their sets were.
Right, and how they can shoot with, not a lot of.
And is there something new they should be building?
We're getting close to the end. I have a question here from Veronica Miles, and it may be for Debra. What are some of your wellness or mindfulness techniques to help yourself stay connected to your creativity while working on your films during any stage of the process?
So not just now, but like all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I would say, well, for documentary, it's usually a call from the person or one of the people, right, Carol, like that you're working, you know, like it just feels so good to get a call from one of the people that you've been photographing closely, and then and especially if they call you and tell you about an interesting shoot, you know, it's like, it feels so good, because it feels like, oh, you know, it's not just my fantasy that it's a collaboration. There really is something here. They really have internalized and gotten comfortable with the idea that we're making this story that involves them. And so that, that feels really, really good. I think working with people you enjoy. I mean, I cannot say, I remember years ago when, you become aware that crews can become so stressful and that shooting can be unpleasant and tension runs high. I think I love that my producing partner, said, how can we do this work and actually also have like a healthy set and feel good about, building crews that we enjoy working together, especially because it's arduous work and it's overly intense. And so that's a big plus when you find some colleagues that you enjoy working with. It fuels you. You feel healthy. You feel good. You feel loyal. You feel dedicated. You feel that someone's got your back and that you've got theirs. And those are good emotions to have in your work life. And I think for me, the one that is not usually it's the non-productive one is fear. Not just COVID, but like fear when I start to anticipate, will someone like this idea? Will someone, what's going to happen if I can't get distribution, if we can't, that those fears are huge. And I haven't really ever figured out how to stay in the bubble of trying to make the film and love on making it and not get afraid of the commerce causes so much anxiety, but so I'll stay with the healthy stuff, which is comrades and phone calls from people that you just really do love hearing from.
I would say for me, and I work a lot I work with extremely small crews or alone, that I have several practices, long form Wu style Tai Chi. I do Bagua and Qigong. And it depends on where I am, which I do, because some of them look awfully weird. And if you did them on a military base, you might get arrested. But I find that it's really good to have some kind of body practice, because writing, editing, fundraising, God knows, can really take you out of your body. And once you get out, once you're like not grounded, you can, God knows what's going to happen. So I find, if I get really screwed up, I try to make a big dinner party for friends. I'm looking for a substitute for that. And then having any kind of body, whether it's swimming, mountain climbing, whatever, just, I think most filmmakers I see, when I was editing, I was constantly sending my directors to the gym, because they were just, they were like a head on a stick and not of any use to me as a responder to the material, because they were thinking through it. They weren't, I don't know what the word is, feeling through it. And you got to be able to get back to that spot any way you can. For me, it's cooking and body work. Good massage never
body work. Okay. At this point, I do want to wrap things up because we have passed already an hour. So I would like to finish with each one of you giving some, in one sentence, sending us, our audience, with some sort of a positive message in terms of how to best make, how to proceed from here in terms of our careers, or the audience careers, in a positive way. Any advice that you may have for them, something that you have learned along the way that worked for you, but keep it to one sentence. So I'm going to start with Ellen.
Well, I would say hang in there. It may be tough for a little while, but don't give up. Things are going to get better. And we all just want to tell good stories. And I think we'll find our people, like Carol was saying, like Deborah was saying, we find people that we are simpatico with along the way. And we just have to not give up.
Not give up. Elissa?
I would say that not giving up is a really, really good lesson. It takes a really long time in this business. Perseverance is really, really important. And passion and really loving it is really important. I would imagine you're pursuing a career in entertainment because, you love it and you're passionate about it. But I would say that, find your discipline within it, and And if it means that you have to do a million things to figure out what you don't like in order to find out what you do like, that's really important too.
Very, very good. Before I move on to the rest, I have a comment here from Rita Taggart, a wonderful actress and the wife of the late Haskell Waxler. And she says, yes, a hero of mine. Thank you so much. And hello, Rita. Thank you so much for this moment. Need to hear this from the front. All power to the women. So that's for you, ladies. Yeah, Rita. So, Jamie,
I think piggybacking onto what Debra said, you know, don't be afraid. You know, sometimes I have to say to myself, just send that email, just do it. I think the fear does, it can really sit with you and hold you back. And you know what, if someone doesn't answer the email, so what? Just move on. Like, and sometimes I send emails and people answer 3 weeks later and it's fine. So, you know, I'd say, no, send that email. Don't be afraid.
Now put your foot forward. Carol?
One sentence, huh?
Yes. Yes, one sentence.
Not my strong suit.
I know.
Sorry. I would just say that if you don't do anything you hate, and if you do the things that you love, you will end and don't quit. Change your mind, but don't quit. You'll get somewhere you like. But know that you don't have to be a director. Sometimes people say, I want to direct movies because that just seems like the best thing to do. But, you know, being an editor was great. Being like, I would love to be a casting director. That would be, you'd meet so many interesting people. There's so many good jobs in this business. And if you can prove your professionalism in one of them, people can say, listen, if she can haul that movie out of the trash can, she can do anything. Yeah, let's give her a chance, right? You know, you prove your professionalism in something, then you'll have a shot to do, people will take a chance on you, but they won't take a chance on you if they haven't seen you persevere.
And Debra.
I'm thinking about maybe like trying to stay flexible or malleable, you know, so you don't get broken, so you don't get brittle and broken. And I was thinking about some stories, you think they're going to be a narrative and they turn out it's better to make a documentary because you can get more complexity in it, more layers. So make sure that, you know, I would say try to stay open to the idea that you might go into a project thinking it has to be one thing and it actually could live a different life and be maybe more accessible. You may be able to green light it yourself if it's approached in a different way. And if, you know, if there's snow in your budget and you can't afford snow, globally, just change it, take out the snow, you know? Yeah. But what I mean is like improvise sometimes. We think, oh, I've got to have snow. This film can't be made without snow, but it can be.
Thank you. Well, ladies, thank you all so very much. It was amazing to listen to all of you. And thank you for taking the time. Thank you, our attendees who I don't see, but I know you're there, for joining us and staying with us. And I hope, for those of you whose question I didn't get to, I'm sorry, I tried to my best. Please join us also next week. We have Fisher Stevens on Tuesday, who will talk about, you know, he executive produced shows like Tiger King. And we also, Carol, behave.
I'm behaving.
Okay. And he also produced The Cove, which won an amazing documentary, which won an Academy Award. On Thursday we have Blair Breer, producer, and Alice Wood, director, with the film The Half of It, which is a fantastic film, and Nywift is co-presenting it, so collaborating with us. So that's really great. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening. Everybody stay well and safe. And see you next time. Good night.
Bye.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Stay
Nice
safe.
to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah.